Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News. IRS provides last-minute tips for last-minute filers. IR 2020-148, July 10th, 2020, Washington. With the July 15th tax filing deadline postponed from April 15th, only a few days away, the IRS is reminding taxpayers who have yet to file their tax returns that IRS.gov, the IRS website, IRS.gov, has tools and services to help them meet their tax obligations. So once again, reminder here, they're saying that the tax deadline was pushed out for 2019 tax filing from April 15th to July 15th. And so if you haven't filed, then you want to file by that point in time. And the IRS website does have some tools that could help you to do so. Back to the text. IRS tax help is available 24 hours a day on IRS.gov, the IRS website. Whether filing a tax return, requesting an extension, or making a payment, the IRS website can help last-minute filers on just about everything related to taxes. Taxpayers can also use the Interactive Tax Assistant. There's a link to the Interactive Tax Assistant tool to help answer many tax questions they may encounter. The IRS reminds taxpayers they have a range of expert help available through a qualified tax professional, including certified public accountants, enrolled agents, and attorneys. So when you're looking for tax preparation, those are typically the individuals that you're considering here: certified public accountants, enrolled agents, and possibly attorneys. If you're looking for attorneys, usually you might be looking for more specific kind of tax-related information and possibly information for representation of some sort as an agent. You know, that's what attorneys typically do, represent you as an agent a lot of times. But they can do tax preparation as well. Back to the text. The IRS encourages people who need the help of a tax professional to visit a special page on IRS.gov. The special page has a link to it here, so you can click on that. There'll be a link to this in the description. Prepare and file taxes for free. Taxpayers also have several options for preparing and filing their tax returns. Preparers with income of $69,000 or less can use the Free File to find free tax preparation software. So if you're at $69,000 or less, if you have a fairly basic return, you might want to consider the Free File software on the IRS website. There's a link to that here. Remember, as you use any software, including the one on the IRS website, you want to see if it takes into consideration your state obligations as well. It's a lot easier to fill out your taxes if you have software that can help you to fill them both out at the same time. They're not exactly the same. States are going to differ. That's why states are a little bit more difficult. IRS website's going to be focusing in on the federal side of things. However, software is getting better and better at being able to pick up the state information as well. So that's just something that you want to, consider when you're doing your tax preparation. Do you have state income taxes? Are you in a state that has state income taxes? If so, are you able to pick those up with the Free File software at the same time and meet those obligations at the same time you do your federal taxes? Back to the text. Taxpayers with incomes above $66,000 and comfortable doing their own taxes can use Free File Fillable Forms for free. So you got the Free File Fillable Forms option. It's probably more complex to do the Free File Fillable Forms. It is definitely more complex than it would be to use software such as the Free File software. So, and if you have a more complex return, that's also going to be a little bit more difficult. But all the resources are there to do so, and you have the instructions and everything for the forms, so you can actually look up the forms, you can look up the instructions, you can read through it. But just remember that even tax professionals will use tax software to support them a lot in terms of the actual filling out of the form. So if you go through the free fillable forms and fill out the actual forms, it's that you can learn a lot by doing that. It's actually a good process to go through, but it's a more complex process. Back to the text. Use commercial tax prep software to prepare and file taxes through IRS approved electronic channels. So those would be, if you're going to do your own taxes, rather than going to a CPA or something like that. So your options then would be, well, if you're under a certain amount, maybe I can use the IRS Free File software and I don't have to pay for it. Or maybe I want to use software that's basically, I buy every year for one return. It's like individual software like an H&R Block or Intuit. The owners of QuickBooks have TurboTax that you can use those, and those go through like an interview process. So they're pretty good for like small to mid-range tax returns. And then once your tax return gets complex to the point where it's a bit more complex for that, obviously you have to pay for that software too. So you're going to have to pay for the software and in order to do that, but then you should be able to process the tax returns probably a little bit easier than the free file fillable forms. And you can process the tax return that way. And then if your tax return gets more complex, then you probably want to look for help with it. And if you were to look for help because your tax return is more complex, then you want them to help you out probably with the preparation of the tax return and possibly be there for you if you have tax planning or if you have an audit or something that comes up in the future. You're probably looking for someone not just for a one-time tax preparation, but at that point, I would be looking for a relationship with somebody to help you do your taxes that's more of a long-term thing. Back to the text. Use an authorized e-file provider accepted by our electronic filing program. Authorized IRS e-file providers are qualified to prepare, transmit, and electronically file returns. Members of the military and qualified veterans can use the MilTax. There's a link to MilTax, a free online tax service provided by the Department of Defense and Military OneSource. So I think that's really worth looking into if you're part of the military, because there are some things that the military is going to differ in, and so you want to be aware of those. You want to use tools to make sure that you're aware of those. And if you go to a tax preparer, they can generally handle those things, but you probably want to have an idea of them, because if they don't do military returns often, they may just they may not look into a couple things that they could, and you want to make sure that you have an understanding of them and present them. And if you give that to them, then they can probably pick it up, or you get your tax return done from people that from resources that specialize in the area of doing taxes for military service personnel. Back to the text. Receive refunds faster. The fastest way to receive a refund is to file electronically and use direct deposit. So the IRS is really pushing, of course, the electronic filing here. They want the return to file electronically, and they would, if you get them the payment, if you get a refund, and meaning they're going to pay you, then it'd be fastest if you give them the information, like banking information, while you process the return, so that they can give you the refund faster. If you don't, then they're going to have to process a paper check, which they can do, but they're really kind of trying to move away from that, and the social distancing thing has made it so that they can do that a little bit more, right? They're moving away from that more, but be aware of that. Back to text. Taxpayers who file electronically and request direct deposit for the refund need to know that 9 out of 10 tax refunds are issued in 21 days or less. The best way to check on a refund is Where's My Refund tool. There's a link to the Where's My Refund tool. It's nice to be able to file electronically, because you can then get some verification that it has been received. And that verification then is going to give you some peace of mind that you've avoided at least a penalty related to late filing. It will also be triggering then the Where's My Payment tool faster, and that'll hopefully help you to track where the refund payment will be as well. If you paper file, then you should be able to avoid any problems with late filing, but the IRS doesn't, is trying to get away from any kind of paper filing process. But if but you still want to send it in by the due date for it. And again, the best thing to do would be to file electronically. And if you can pay electronic, if you send the check in, then same thing. You want to make sure you send the check in before the due date. It might take them a little longer to process it. In other words, if you owe them money, then they'd still like you to give them the money electronically. They're really pushing for that to happen. But in that case, you may not be caring so much if the thing got processed really quickly. They care, right? But in that case, maybe you wouldn't mind sending them a check, but just make sure that you log it in correctly and track the check so that they can't say that you didn't send it in on time for it to get there. All right, back to the text. The best way to check a refund is Where's My Refund. The Where's My Refund tool available on IRS.gov and the IRS.to-go mobile app. There's a link to the IRS.to-go mobile app here. Where's My Refund is updated once a day, usually overnight. So you probably don't need to check it like all the time, like once a day, twice a day, morning, night, maybe, because it's updated overnight. So once a day checking it's probably all the new information you're going to get. Back to the text. Refunds can be divided into up to 3 accounts. Delays for paper tax returns. The IRS is experiencing delays in processing paper tax returns due to limited staffing. So again, I almost think there's a little bit of purposefulness here because they've been trying to push away from these paper tax returns for a long time. But obviously with the social distancing there could be a delay to the paper tax return more so. So so if you have a refund coming to you, then the paper tax return and sending in a check is going to take longer. If you owe money, then all right, well, whatever. If it takes a few years for you to cash my check, then so be it. But in any case, back to the text. This is another reason that the taxpayer should choose to electronically file their taxes. Taxpayers who filed a paper tax return and expect a refund may experience a delay beyond the normal time frame of 4 to 6 weeks from the time they mailed the return. The IRS will process the paper returns in the order they are received. So they're going to be processed in the order they're received. Okay, so if you have to pay them, a check, then again, it might take them longer. I can imagine them going through the mail and basically opening them all up to see if they got their check, and then they don't process the return until later. But in any case, back to the text. Taxpayers should not file the same return again or call the IRS if they filed a paper tax return and are experiencing a refund delay. Get more time to file. Individual taxpayers who need additional time to file beyond the July 15th deadline can request a filing extension to October 15th in one of two ways. So same process for the extension, except that the extension usually happens on April 15th, when the tax return is usually due, April 15th for the 2019 tax return, and then you could file an extension normally till October. So now the original date of filing got pushed out to July 15th, but you could still file an extension, but the extension date didn't get pushed out. It's still going to only be extended to October 15th, the same extension date. So it looks like the IRS is trying to say, okay, we've been delaying everything, all this delay business with payments and tax returns and whatnot, and we're drawing the line here, July 15th, and so it looks like, and everything it looks like they're trying to get the dates all lined up back to normal after that point in time. So they didn't extend the extension time period, but you can still file an extension and go to the normal end date, which is October 15th. Back to the text. For filing an extension, how would you do it? One of two ways. Filing Form 4868 through their tax professional tax software or using the free file link on IRS.gov. So it's a Form 4868. It's a basic form to fill out. If you have a tax preparer, you can have them fill it out, but you don't really need a tax preparer. If you don't have one, then it should be an easy process to do. You can use the free file link here as well. There's a link to that. The most difficult part of the form is to fill out how much tax you owe, because you still need to fill out the amount of tax you owe on it, and because the payment is different than the filing status. And you're going to say, I don't know how much I owe because I didn't do the taxes. That's why I'm filing the extension. But you need to make an estimate there because it's okay that it's not exact, right? You don't know, but you're trying to make an extension. You're trying to make a payment so that if you need to make a payment, if you're getting a refund, then no problem. You just file an extension and it'll take longer to get your refund, and the IRS says that's fine because we'll just hold on to your money until you file the refund. It's like a loan for us. But if you owe them money, then you're going to have to fill out how much you owe them, estimate it, and then you're trying to avoid additional penalties related to the late payment, as well as avoid the penalties related to the late filing. You avoid the penalties for the late filing by filing the form, the extension 4868, and you avoid penalties related to late payment by, if owing any payment, paying that payment at that point in time. Back to the text. You can also submitting an electronic payment with direct pay, electronic federal tax payment system, or debit, credit card, or digital wallet options. So they're getting really good at providing a lot of different options to pay them now, which is nice. So that they want the electronic payment options and whatnot. Just make sure that if you pay them, because you could have multiple things due at this point in time. Now you got the 2019 tax return is due on July 15th. You've got 2 quarters of the 2020. If you're a sole proprietorship, if you have your own business, they pushed those deadlines out, and those 2 payments are now due for 2020. And so you could have multiple, also people that were on payment plans and stuff got some of their payments were delayed for some time, and they're all starting to come due right now. So that means that many people will actually owe payments to the IRS for many different things. 2019 2020, and possibly for some installment agreements could all be coming due at this point in time. So that means when you make a payment to them, make sure that you're telling them what the payment should go to. What you don't want to have happen is you make a payment to them and they say, oh, we applied that here and then we gave it back to you or something like that, and then we charged you penalties and interest because you didn't pay us. And it's like, I did pay you. You just charged it to the wrong thing and paid, right? That kind of stuff happens. So just make sure that if you're making a payment that's applying to the extension tax return for 2019, when you make the payment, make sure that you attribute it to that tax return and make sure that you have in your, try your best to see when you have in your records the payments that you've made, not only that, but what period they are applying to, 2019, 2020, or an installment agreement or whatever is going on. So that should be indicated as you make the payment. So you want to select the Form 4868 or extension as the payment type. The automatic extension of time to file will process when taxpayers pay all or part of their taxes electronically by July 15th due date. On extension to file is not an extension to pay. Taxes are still due by July 15th. So if you file an extension, remember those two things are different. Your goal, avoid penalties and interest. Avoid penalties and interest. How? Well, if you file by July 15th, you avoid penalties related to late filing. If you can't file and you file an extension, you still avoid penalties related to late filing. But that doesn't take away any penalties for late payments. So if you don't owe any payments, if you're going to get a refund, then you don't have a problem with penalties related to late payments. However, if you do owe something, then the other thing you need to do is make the payment in order to avoid penalties related to late payments. What if you can't pay them? Well, then you're going to probably have some penalties and interest, but you could set up an installment agreement to be in good faith standing with the IRS and limit the amount of penalties and interest related to it. Back to the text. Special rules may apply for some military personnel if they are surviving in combat zone or a qualified hazardous duty area. There's a link to that here. Living outside the United States. So there's a link to that here. If that applies to you, you can go to those links and check out some of that information. Pay with ease. Taxpayers can file now and schedule their federal tax payments up to the July 15th due date. They can pay online, by phone, or with their mobile device using the IRS.gov app. When paying federal taxes electronically, taxpayers should remember electronic payment options, there's a link to that here, are the optimal way to make tax payments. So again, they're really pushing this electronic payment options. They got a lot of options that you can pay them electronically, even with your phone, which is good, I guess. Back to the text. They can pay when they file electronically using tax software online. If using a tax preparer, taxpayers should ask the preparer to make the tax payment through an electronic funds withdrawal from a bank account. So if you're doing the taxes with a tax preparer, then they're going to have tax software and they should be able to make the payment through the use of the tax software if you ask them to do so. Back to the text. IRS Direct Pay allows taxpayers to pay online directly from a checking or savings account for free and to schedule payments up to 365 days in advance. Taxpayers can choose to pay with a credit card, debit card, or digital wallet option through a payment processor. So there's a link to the payment processor. The payment processor adds a fee. No fees go to the IRS. So if you do that option, you might experience a fee that happens there, but it's not the IRS's fault because they didn't charge it. It's the third party that charged the fee. But in any case, you'll still get a fee. So, you might want to do the bank account if possible. And then if you can't, go to the credit card. Back to the text. The IRS.gov app provides the mobile-friendly payment options, including direct pay and through payment providers. Taxpayers may also enroll the electronic federal tax payment system, link to that here, and have a choice of paying online or by phone by using the EFTPS voice response system. Get more time to pay. Qualified taxpayers can choose to pay any taxes owed over time through an installment agreement. So a lot of people probably are going to find that they can't pay at this point in time. I'm expecting that more taxpayers would fall into that situation, given the fact that the IRS is basically saying, all right, July 15th, no more extending stuff. Everything's due like now. So that means that, probably more people may not be able to pay because you got 2 quarters for 2019 coming due, and then 2020 coming due for sole proprietors for estimated tax payments, and you got 2019 stuff coming due and any kind of installment. So that means you might have to set up an installment agreement. If it's the first time you set up an installment agreement, that's kind of the go-to option, right? That normally if you can't pay your taxes, then you basically set up an installment agreement with which is basically kind of a loan. You have an obligation to the IRS for the amount that you owe, and you're going to set up a loan, and they're going to basically charge you interest on it, just like any other kind of loan, and you're going to make payments on it, and that kind of thing. And that should be set up pretty easily. You don't even really have to talk to anyone. Oftentimes, you could basically do it online and set it up. So don't have any fear of that. You can, if you can't make your payment, in other words, don't just not do the taxes, because you want to avoid penalties. And that means you want to avoid the penalties of not filing taxes. And then you won't be able to avoid all penalties related to not paying late payments, but you can avoid some of them by doing the installment agreement, setting up basically a loan, which is a pretty easy process to do. And then you'll have lower penalties, and you'll just have to be dealing with the interest, and you'll reduce the likelihood of getting any kind of collection notices from the IRS, which can be a little, troublesome, bothersome to deal with. So you want to be in good standing for that reason as well. Back to the text. An online payment can be set up in a matter of minutes. Interest and late payment penalties continue to accrue on any unpaid taxes after July 15th. Payment options include short-term payment plan, paying within 120 days, long-term payment plan, paying in more than 120 days. However, a taxpayer's specific tax situation will determine which payment options are available. The IRS has more information for taxpayers who owe taxes but cannot afford to pay full amount. There's a link to that here. So if you want more information, it's like that's the first time you've kind of fallen into that category, then you can kind of read up on that. They do put a lot of this information just on the website. So, you can go there and get basically what their policies and stances are for these types of situations, typically to pretty high degree of detail. So you can go there and just research it and check it out. Back to the text. Get the full picture. Taxpayers can go to IRS.gov/account to securely access information about their federal tax account. They can view the amount they owe, access their tax records online, review their payment history, and view key tax return information for the most recent tax return as originally filed. So that's really a nice tool to have now. All this information that your W-2 and all that kind of stuff, that any tax form that you get, the reason you get it is because the government, is basically forcing the banks and your employer to give it not only to you, but to them. So they have that information too. So it might take a while to get like the transcripts, a little bit longer to process the transcripts, but it's getting better and better that you can access that information as well as the recent tax return information on there as well. Notice when you go to the IRS, however, it's usually going to show that information in the transcripts and with that kind of information for the federal side. It may not have the kind of the state information that you may need as well. But it's nice that information is available. It's becoming more and more easily accessible to people. So if you want to verify something about your taxes or prior year taxes or prior year transcripts or something like that, you can go online and check it out.